Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It is the Monday show on a Wednesday. I'm Andrew Musgrove, joined by Aaron Stokes, and today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about England's new manager in Thomas Tuchel, which is good news for Newcastle United because that means Eddie Howe will not be leaving the Magpies and taking over as the country's new manager, something we knew all along, really. Aaron, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. It feels odd to be doing this show on a Wednesday after 2 days of you not being in. Are you okay? Are you coping?
I've had the worst few days ever, and I'm hoping some parents listening to this podcast can relate. I've had a little one with a chest infection. Thankfully, she's okay. I've got a wife with the flu, and I've got a headache, which just feels like someone is beating drums inside my head consistently. I've had about 4 hours sleep over the last 48 hours. So, no, I'm not all right. I'm not all right at all. I'm not 100%. But for our listeners and viewers, you know what is 100%? It is our new sponsor, NORD VPN, and I'm so happy that they're on board. I used NORD VPN when I was in Dortmund, when me and Aaron went over to watch Newcastle last season in the Champions League. And what it offers you is just that extra element of protection. It's really strong protection, a unique kind of element for your laptop and your phone against scammers. It's really good when you're abroad or even just out on the bus here in the United Kingdom on the bus or in the cafes when you're on public Wi-Fi, especially. It stops the scammers getting to your important details or your important content. So I am over the moon that they are on board. Aaron, I know you've used it before. You're happy to have NordVPN sponsoring the pod?
Yeah, as you just said there, obviously we used it together in Dortmund. I used it in Milan for that first Champions League game last year. So I can definitely recommend it. So yeah, very, very good to have them on board.
And just for you guys as well, we've got a special offer, and all the details will be in the podcast description. So to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/tune. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. And as I said, the link is in the podcast episode description box. So do go and click that link, sign up, get the very best deal possible, and help support this podcast. Thanks to NordVPN for helping us continue to do what we do for free, bringing you the best Newcastle United content around. It really is appreciated. On to the big story of the week then, and that is that Thomas Tuchel is to become England manager from the 1st of January 2025, signing an 18-month contract. He's the third non-British manager after Fabio Capello and Sven-Göran Eriksson. And before we get into that, I have to say, Aaron, I think the overwhelming response that I've got from my mates in the group chats is just how much they're enjoying the fact that Manchester United have screwed this royally up.
Yeah, I think Manchester United and Dan Ashworth particularly might be kicking themselves that they didn't give Ten Hag the boot, given that it looked like Tuchel was the man they wanted in the summer and potentially going forward. Look, I'm really happy with it. I think in terms of the managers that are out there at the minute on the sort of free agency available with no compensation, I think he's the best of the lot. His knockout record in club football is ridiculous. His CV is vast. He's very experienced. He's been at the biggest clubs. It doesn't always end well for him at clubs. He's left under a cloud quite a few times, but you know, does that really matter when you're an international manager and you're only sort of dealing with these players, you know, a couple of times a year? I don't think so. I'm very, very happy with it, I know that there's negatives and people have already started to point them out, but I'm fully on board with Tuchel, and I think it's a very, very smart appointment.
Well, you're not just fully on board. I mean, you are absolutely in love with this appointment because last night when it was confirmed he was taking over, you tweeted, unbelievable appointment, UEFA Champions League winner with Chelsea, finalist with PSG, robbed in the semis with Bayern, knockout footy specialist. You have to fear that it's finally coming home.
And now you disagree with that statement?
I mean, England have let me down so many times. You know me. I'm not a fan of international football at all. I think he's one of the best managers around, and as you say, I think it was always unlikely that England were going to poach anyone that was in a job. So whether that be Eddie Howe, I don't think they would have waited for Pep Guardiola until the summer. Even if it might have been a push, they might have done, but I think it was unlikely they were ever going to get anyone out of their contract. So when you look at who was available, Graham Potter, Tuchel, look, Tuchel tops the list. He really, really does. Can he win the World Cup, which is obviously got to be the aim? There'll be an expectation that they go extremely far in that competition, if not to the final, if not to win it by many people, including yourself. I don't know. I think that you mentioned it, the way it ends at clubs. Can he handle the pressure that's going to come with this job? I'm not too sure.
I think if you're sort of against the appointment, you look at the fact that he's never managed internationally, which is obviously sort of a cross rather than a tick. I would also maybe look at some of the training regimes that he puts players through. I mean, there's a boatload of stories about what he does on the training pitch. He makes players play on a pitch that's a third smaller so that they get used to sort of playing in space in match days. He makes them run around with tennis balls in their hands so that they can't grab onto players' shirts, and they've got to become stronger just by using their body. And he makes them train with footballs that are half the size. So I mean, that's all well and good when you're training with players 4 or 5 times a week, but when you're training with them 5 or 6 times a year, are they going to buy into his model? I don't know. It is a little bit of a risk, but I think the appointment itself, as you've just touched on there, is an appointment that says, we need to be winning trophies and we want to be going into the World Cup in 2026 and winning it. And I think Southgate at the start wasn't that appointment. I think Carsley was, a huge risk because he's very much style over substance, even though he's won the Under-21 Euros. I think you've just got to look at Tuchel's CV, as I touched on in that tweet last night, his record in knockout football and how he can manage games where you've got 90 minutes to win it is absolutely fantastic. So look, yeah, I'm the same as you. I don't usually get too excited with international football. If I'm completely honest, I haven't really let myself get too immersed in it in the last couple of years, but I think that might change now that Tuchel's in the job.
I mean, from memory, he was always quite a spiky character. And obviously when you take over the England job, you either have to get the results quickly or the press can turn, and that's when the press are actually on your side. And we've seen some shocking reaction, especially from one national newspaper, which I will not mention, but their back page to today's edition is absolutely disgraceful, to put it quite frankly. Dark day for England or something along those lines. They gamble on a German and what have you. There's just no need for that. But I think it shows you, especially where some people's already going with that, and if he doesn't pick up a win in his first few games, and automatically the heat is turned up. I think he comes into this needing to hit the ground running.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that headline that you touched on there, you wouldn't be surprised if that was from 1944 rather than 2024. I mean, it's pretty archaic if you ask me. But I think you make a good point. I think if Carsley had got the job, he would have had maybe a little period of grace like Southgate had. He would have maybe had a tournament or two to get going. I think Tuchel now is pretty much starting from a negative spot, and he got to hit the ground running now because there's so much pressure on him because of that nationality aspect that so many people are clinging on. There's a quote here along the same lines from Gary Neville, and he says, obviously Gary Neville's coach for England before, he was involved in the setup at major tournaments. He says, I think we are damaging ourselves. I do think there are outstanding English candidates who could have been appointed. We're in a rut when it comes to coaching with England, and we don't have a clear identity. Now, usually I agree with Gary Neville, but I mean, really? I mean, the last time an English coach won an English trophy was Harry Redknapp in 2008. Gareth Southgate did very well with his team. Lee Carsley, I was actually on board with the Lee Carsley appointment before it all sort of fell apart last week very, very rapidly. But, who else is there out there apart from Eddie Howe, who I don't want to leave, apart from Graham Potter, who, again, is style over actually winning things. I think England have just gone the complete other way this time, and they're saying, look, we need to end this, hoodoo of not winning trophies. And I think, going further afield is the way to do that rather than keeping it in-house. I understand, people are saying, well, should the England manager not be English? But for me, I think, I couldn't care less what nationality they are if they're winning trophies and bringing success.
It's funny, isn't it? Because when you look at, say, when Roy Hodgson was appointed, he was one of the more successful English managers around, and he got bad press. It ended pretty badly for him. They don't have to be English, in my opinion. They just have to care about the job, understand the importance to the fan base, and get on with it. Their nationality serves no importance to me whatsoever. It's all about the style of play, and getting the results at the end of the day.
Well, Tuchel's big thing was obviously, he left Chelsea pretty prematurely. He won them the Champions League, and this new, very unique gung-ho ownership model came in and sacked him pretty unfairly to bring their own man in. And you always got the feeling with Tuchel that he had sort of unfinished business in the Premier League. There was obviously lots of speculation about Manchester United over the summer. So I think, yes, it's not the same manager in the Premier League to manage in England, but he's clearly got that affinity with England. And from the 2 interviews that I've heard him do so far this morning after England confirmed it, he speaks very well. Look, time will tell whether he'll be a success. As I mentioned earlier, it is a little bit of a gamble, but I think you look at his CV, and I'm really surprised that I've seen quite a large portion of England fans turning their nose up at this type of appointment.
And the last time they went down this route was Fabio Capello, who'd obviously had a great playing career and a great managing career as well. Managed, Real Madrid, AC Milan, Juventus before taking over England. He's got the highest percentage rate, Lee Carsley aside, of the last few managers, 66.7%. In fact, you've got to go back to, I'm trying to scroll down as quick as I can. In fact, it looks like he's probably the highest win percentage rate of anyone who's gone a decent amount of time in the job. I think you've just got to judge people on what they've done before. And look, I'm not inspired because I don't like international football. I don't like having random breaks from domestic football at random times. I mean, what on earth is the Nations League? It's an absolute waste of time. But when I look at Tuchel and
another one next month to look forward to.
Why? Just you get going and then you have to stop, and then we're struggling around for content and stories, and it's just like just let us play football.
That's why you don't like it, because it affects the Monday show and your podcast schedule.
That's exactly what it is. And we had a belter original Monday show lined up for you people. We will do it. And let me just give you a little taste now. It was we now when we're going to pick a starting 11 each based on players who we wished had stayed longer at Newcastle United. And let me tell you, mine Premier League winning title side. But anyway, we'll do that sometime, probably in the next international break if I don't get hit by the lurgy again. But yeah, you just judge people on what they've done. And I think he's got to be given a clean slate. He's got to be given a fresh chance to really impress people. Forget how it ended at Bayern, forget how it ended at Chelsea. Just give him a chance. I mean, everyone thought, or the majority of people thought, when he left Chelsea, what are you doing? Like an absolutely bizarre sacking, because he just won the Champions League. He'd obviously won the Super Cup and he'd won the Club Cup as well, Club World Cup. Like there were very few people who agreed with that. And I think maybe the only people who could see the reasoning behind the sacking were maybe Chelsea fans, or a small part of them, which maybe raises a few red flags about, from fans who've watched him a little bit closer. Yeah,
potentially. I still think the overwhelming feeling at Chelsea was that he was sacked too soon, prematurely, unfairly. But just on your point about sort of giving him a period of grace, I don't think, as we touched on, I don't think he's going to get it. I think
he's not.
We've already seen in the last 24 hours the reaction to it. And one thing I want to say about that reaction to it is, would the same reaction have been sort of seen if it was Pep Guardiola getting the job? I don't think it would have. I mean, there was even one pretty big columnist who works for a national newspaper who 3 or 4 days ago was saying, England need to go out and get Pep. What an inspired choice. He would be the man. To all of a sudden saying, Tuchel's the wrong appointment. So is it because he's German or is it because he's foreign? I don't know, but I don't think he will get any period of grace. I think he's got to hit the ground running. And I think anything less than getting to the final, really putting in a good showing at the World Cup. And I think there will be people calling for him. But I agree with you. I think, this isn't going to be an appointment where he's going to lose the job in 3-4 months. He's here for, until at least the World Cup, if they make it, which they should. Get excited, people. Get excited about it.
I did see that columnist and I had to go, but I actually thought it was a parody. Like I actually thought, because it was such a leap from what he'd said 4 days prior to then what he'd said. Again, I'm not going to mention the chap. You can find it on social media, but I actually thought it was a joke. Tuchel has done a little bit of a message on Twitter, and I'm actually quite happy to read the comments, and a lot of people, saying good things about him. One, a couple of Newcastle fans actually saying, "What a man! Always wanted him at the Toon, but the next best thing." Gaffer with a backbone. Fair play for the FA to having the stones to go for it. Good luck, Thomas. So there is a lot of support out there, which is really, really good. And what it does mean is that Eddie Howe was staying, which we always said he would. We always said he wouldn't be going anywhere at all, because he made it quite clear, or his people around him made it quite clear that his focus is on Newcastle United. We know that if the FA had come for him, it would have cost him a pretty penny as well. And really, I think, from Newcastle's point of view, I think they sat quite comfortably on this for many, many months. And we know that it kept popping up, certain reports here and there. But I think Newcastle United were confident Eddie Howe was never going to leave for England, this season.
Well, I mean, this is the full point of the podcast, isn't it? So that we can just sit here and rejoice at the fact that it's case closed, and we don't have to worry. Not that we were worried, as you say. I think this has sort of been massively played down since the summer when we were all in Germany, worrying about what Eddie Howe was going to say, and obviously that infamous Paul Mitchell interview came out. I think, as you've touched on, this was sort of case closed when Eddie Howe came out and spoke a couple of weeks ago. It bent him when he basically said, it's not something I think about the England job. If I end my career and I haven't managed England, I don't think I'll lose any sleep over it. And that was quite a big leap from what he said when he was Bournemouth manager, where he was asked a similar question and he said, look, it's such a big job. It would be, an ambition, a lifelong dream, a huge thing to say no to. I think where we've seen Eddie Howe come, from then to now, I don't think there was ever really any doubt that he was going to leave Newcastle. Not at this stage of the journey, not even with all that stuff that was swirling around in the summer, with Stavely going, with Mitchell coming in, with all that stuff we were worried about. Look, I think further down the line, potentially, but I just think, Eddie Howe, someone who is so committed to training and, physical demands of the Premier League and how much it takes out of you and how much he craves and thrives that. I just can't see him managing a team 4 times a year and training with the players 8 times a year. I just don't think it's where he's at this stage in his career.
You might look at the Thomas Tuchel appointments and how he gets on over the next 18 months as a bit of a lesson, really, because I imagine for Thomas Tuchel, who's equally as meticulous. I mean, you've described some of his training methods there. I mean, I didn't know that. I knew he was a man who didn't leave any stone unturned, but actually hearing what he does is quite something. And you might look at it and think, well, if he struggles, how is Thomas Tuchel going to go from club football to international football? You might look at it and think, well, if he struggled, I'm going to struggle in that role as well. So I think Newcastle were confident he wasn't going to leave. I think when he had that interview in Germany, there was an ever slight chance. I think that was Eddie Howe just trying to push his agenda as far as he could get it, just to see what he could get out of it. And I think when they sat down and they've had the clear the air talks, they've obviously got, both sides have got what they wanted in terms of that. And then Newcastle United, I don't think from that point on were ever worried about losing Eddie Howe to replace Gareth Southgate, which is fantastic news. Also, we'll briefly mention it, even though it's absolute nonsense, but we will briefly mention it. The links to Tottenham for Eddie Howe. Again, I mean, we pour cold water it straight away. It's just not going to happen. I think one of the main reasons it's not going to happen is that the reason Eddie Howe has slightly been stung this season is because of the PSR mess that Newcastle found themselves in. And that happens with Amanda Stavely and Mirdad Guendouzi at the club. So it's not like he'd be going somewhere where he might in his head think, it's going to be 100% clear sailing here, because the mess he's currently kind of clearing up, for want of a better phrase, was done while they were still part of the boardroom team. So I think that will play in his mind. And also he's just committed to Newcastle United, isn't he?
Yeah, I think obviously just for context for those who maybe didn't see it over the weekend, it was a report that came out on Saturday or Sunday saying that, once Stavely potentially gets her hands on a minority role at Tottenham, she'll look to back Eddie Howe for the job. Now, look, should Ange leave and should Stavely and Guendouzi get in at Spurs, there's absolutely nothing to suggest that Howe wouldn't go there. But I certainly think it's quite a leap, given that one, Stavely isn't in the club, and two, she isn't going to be the owner. Daniel Levy is still the man in charge, and he's the one who makes the hiring and firing decisions. So as you say, pour cold water on that one. I think, there'll be plenty of speculation if and when Ten Hag goes, but again, is he going to go and work with Dan Ashworth with how it ended here? I'm not too sure.
I don't think so.
And also,
because
would he want the job at Manchester United? I don't know. Maybe we're looking at it through black and white tinted spectacles, but is Manchester United these days a big step up? Look, maybe in terms of stature and finances, but in terms of where they are on the pitch, I don't think so. So I'm just getting that one in there, ready for when Ten Hag goes in the next couple of weeks, and we're sat talking about it. But as you say,
Man U's not the club that it once was. It's a circus of a club. I mean, we saw the other day, Sir Alex Ferguson getting released from this ambassador contract. On one hand, I can understand you wanting to save yourself £2 million a year, whatever much it is, but also there's a way to do it, and there's a way to go about it. And for it to be released like that is
optics
an absolute embarrassment. But what they've done as a club and as a minority ownership, isn't it? They just seem to be gun-ho and everything. There doesn't seem to be any kind of, I don't know what the right word is, but everything's just about saving money and cost cutting, and the optics, as you've said, are not good anywhere you look about what he's done so far. I mean, keeping Ten Hag in the summer, what a baffling decision. I mean, I'm all for it because Manchester United are just, limping on. And the Dan Ashworth thing and Eddie Howe, I mean, look, Dan Ashworth was not part of Eddie Howe's inner circle, which I think caused a little bit of friction. I'm not entirely sure that they got on well enough for Manchester United to ever be an option. And also, I think whatever mistakes have been made here at Newcastle United won't be allowed to be made again. And I think they're much further ahead, obviously, because of the time of the ownership and whatever, than Manchester United's current owners are in terms of making sure that they can go forward without any of these silly mistakes. So I think how we'll look at that and think, it's maybe, a little bit stormy here, but it's much more stormy down in the northwest. So, bet the devil, So, yeah, he's not going anywhere at all, which is fantastic news. And he's not going to Spurs either. You mentioned that Tuchel needs a really good start, and he's not going to get that kind of period to have a bad start at it. But really, with these players that he's got, he should have a good start, shouldn't he? Like, England on paper are one of the best sides in the world, without a doubt. It's just about, as one of those fans said, we're having a backbone and making sure that you're picking the right players for the team. You are not doing what Lee Carsey did 2 games ago and just kind of shove everybody in the team because they're big stars or they're really talented. It's just not going to work. So as long as he's picking the right team for England, and I think even if he does that and he has to leave Foden on the bench or what have you, the players that he'll be playing are still good enough to make sure he does have a good start.
Yeah, I think he definitely needs to avoid what Carsey's done, not just against Greece, but in general, just the tinkering. I mean, I was looking last week for a piece I was writing about Lewis Hall, and in the last 3 or 4 games, England have played Rico Lewis, Ezri Konsa, and Trent Alexander-Arnold, all of them at left back. Trent at left back. I know he played well against Finland, but he's not a left back. So I think Tuchel needs to find that best team and stick with it. But I think also on that point, he's got a big task on his hand, and it was what Southgate really couldn't do over the summer. And that is, how do you find a way to get players, the best players, in their normal position, rather than trying to shoehorn them all in? Now, of course, you can look, well, how do you get Foden, Bellingham, and Palmer in the same team? It isn't going to be easy, but you hope with 18 months before the World Cup for him to bed it in, find his best side. I mean, they should, unless they do a Steve McLaren, they should qualify for the World Cup pretty easily, given the standard of players. So yeah, look, it's not an easy job. The media, I'm sure, won't help with that. They won't make his life any easier. It is a little bit of a poison chalice. You could maybe say he's got too many riches to try and fit into one team, but at the same time, people talk about the golden generation of Gerrard and Lampard and Beckham. I mean, if England don't win anything with this crop of players, it will be a real shame. But I think if anyone's going to do it, it's the man that's won, 11 trophies at club level.
If you're Anthony Gordon, what are you thinking about the future of your England career? Obviously, he was quite complimentary about Lee Carsey. He's worked with him at the under-21s, and he's really been given an opportunity under him. Are you a little bit concerned if you're him?
Well, I was thinking potentially because, Carsley staying would have been huge for Anthony Gordon because of how much he trusts him. But actually, you've got to remember it wasn't too long ago that Chelsea were trying to buy Anthony Gordon from Everton, and a certain Thomas Tuchel was the manager there. Now, you don't know whether Tuchel had so much say in that. But look, Anthony Gordon just needs to keep doing what he's doing. He's been fantastic for England. He started the season well. We suspect that contract will get announced in the next couple of days at Newcastle, or the next couple of weeks, which will hopefully, inspire maybe a little bit of a purple patch from him. I wouldn't be too worried if I'm Anthony Gordon. Also, there's on the record quotes from Tuchel about how he didn't want to sell Tino Livramento when he was at Chelsea, but Tino had to go because of he wanted first team football, and that's why he went to Southampton. And you've also got to remember that he knows Lewis Hall as well from his time at Chelsea. So, Newcastle's 3 players that are hoping to nail down a spot for that 2026 World Cup. I think it's quite a good appointment for all 3 of them.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I think Tino Livramento has a really good opportunity, I think, to nail down a place in the next kind of 18 months if he manages to keep out of the side. Jordan Pickford's been having a terrible time of it, so I don't think his spot is safe. I think what's interesting is that you kind of knew with Gareth Southgate what was going to happen. Jordan Pickford could literally kick the ball into his own net at Goodison Park and still be England's number 1. But with a new manager, you expect it to be a clean slate, don't you? You expect, of course, he's going to know how good Bellingham is. He's going to know how good Declan Rice is. But he would hope he's going to go in that first training session and then his first game next year and go, everyone's place is up for grabs here. You've got to impress me.
Yeah, 100%. And as you say, that there is for Newcastle, there's probably 4 places that you'd say are up for grabs, and that is out on the left where Gordon's already got a head start. Nick Pope will certainly be thinking, look, I'm going to use this time to impress and potentially, maybe take advantage of Pickford's, rare drop in form for England. And then you look at the fullbacks and you think, look, well, Kyle Walker's getting no younger. Kieran Trippier's retired. Trent potentially could be playing in midfield if that's where Tuchel thinks he's best. Tino Livramento, who's now had 2 or 3 call-ups under his belt, he needs to be thinking, right, well, that right-back spot could be mine. And also, you look at the state of play on the left-back. I've already touched on there the fact that, Rico Lewis had been playing there. He's maybe not a natural left-back. Is he good enough at the minute? As we consider as a centre-back, Luke Shaw can't stay fit. Ben Chilwell can't get a game at Chelsea. There is opportunities there for Lewis Hall to grab the opportunity. So very, very exciting times for a Newcastle player, sort of, hoping to knock on the door.
Yeah, most certainly so. And just before we sign off there and everyone goes and clicks on that link for their NORD VPN subscription, the link is in the podcast description. Please do click on it. A great weekend for Newcastle women against our nearest and dearest down the road.
Yeah, fantastic. Look, I think firstly, fantastic for the region, to see 15,000 at the stadium, it's fantastic. It was dubbed as the biggest game in women's football history, and I think it definitely was that. It set a new attendance record for the second tier, but also, the result, I don't think many of us expected that at this stage of the journey for Newcastle to go behind enemy lines and beat Sunderland, who are obviously such an experienced team. So fantastic for Becky Langley. They've started the season very, very well with 3 wins from 5 games. And look, who knows, the rate they're going, 3 consecutive promotions might not be out of reach.
Yeah, fingers crossed. They have started the campaign so well, and long may that continue. Congratulations, Newcastle United women, for beating Sunderland over the weekend. To you guys watching, thank you as always. Please do give the video a thumbs up, hit subscribe on the channel. To you guys listening on the audio channel, please do leave us a rating and review, and do go and get your NORD VPN subscription. It is definitely worth it, and we'll be talking you through all the benefits over the next few weeks and months, and there are a lot of benefits you probably don't even know, including how to maybe get a hotel a little bit cheaper abroad, and I'll reveal that in our next episode. I might even tell John Gibson it, because I'm going to have to show him how to use it. But it's very simple as well. If you're a listener or viewer of an older age, it's a very simple 1 click to get it done. But I'm now going to go and lie down in a dark room with a tea towel over my head, because I am in absolute agony, not because of anything you've said or your crushing enthusiasm for the appointment of Thomas Tuchel. But thank you guys for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure. And for myself and Aaron, we will see you on Monday, hopefully, for the Monday show. Thank you very much.